Pandemonium Reigns.
Pandemonium Reigns podcast. What is up? Happy weekend. Happy TGIF. Whenever you're tuning into this episode of Pandemonium Reigns podcast, we appreciate it so much. Go ahead and hit like on this video. Share and subscribe if you have not already. We appreciate it so much. And we're here to talk about freaking week 11. The season continues to slip away from us, but it is an absolute jam-packed weekend, crammed full of great games, great matchups, a lot on the line, a lot on the table this time of the year anyway, and this weekend just does not disappoint. Gonna flip the script a little bit today because, as you can see, your boy is flying solo. I'm gonna hit you with just some quick picks before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the slate, because there's so many good games. I mean, you could just spend hours and hours, I think, talking about week 11 and the matchups that we have in the top 25 alone. If you dip into the unranked versus unranked matchups, it just goes deeper and deeper. It's absolutely unbelievable. But nonetheless, let's get into the games. We're going to get it started with some West Coast action. The Pac-12 alone this week, you've got Arizona traveling to Colorado, USC traveling to Oregon. I think you know how we're going to land on that one. You've also got Utah traveling to Washington. That is two really good games. One additional matchup that just is going to bring a lot of attention because it's still Dion, it's still Colorado. You've still got Arizona coming out of the absolute woodwork this season. 6-3 record for the Wildcats, which if you predicted that through 9 games, again, I need receipts, I need records. You got to show me, because I just don't know that anyone saw that coming, because they've been a program on the rise, and here they are. Again, 6-3 through 9 games. They are 10-point road favorites in Boulder for a 2 o'clock local time kick at Colorado on Saturday. Again, 10-point favorites. I certainly like them to win this game, not just because they're 6-3, but more so because of the sustained struggles that we've seen for Colorado this year. And, you know, if you're bought into the sport, you knew that it was coming at some point. You knew that it would be tough for Dion and co. To sustain the success, the pressure that they allow on Shadur Sanders, the limitations that come when you bring in so many transfers, when you've been a program that Colorado's been, and you've got Arizona kind of on just a different trajectory right now, ranked 21st in the nation per ESPN. I mean, that's outstanding coaching. That is a fantastic job instilling a winning culture out there from just what was a terrible, terrible program. So really proud of the Arizona Wildcats on that front, especially with the changes coming to the Pac-12. But again, you've got them 10-point favorites going into Boulder. I'm going to say they probably cover that. It could really go either way. I certainly think they're going to win the game. You've got an over-under 54.5. That feels so low with how we know at least Colorado can score points given the opponent. I'm going to say they hit the over. I'm going to say Arizona covers. They're definitely winning the game, even if they don't cover, even with the road struggles that I'm not going to go as far into this week when previewing these games. Staying out west, again, just an absolute bomb of a game here. You've got Utah traveling to Washington. Washington 9.5-point home favorites, which feels steep. It feels just a hair steep because Utah has just done so much without really Cam Rising, with second and third string getting so deep into their quarterback depth chart, not really mattering who's played. Not the biggest fan of how Washington's been playing. They obviously went into LA and they won by 10 last week. That doesn't do a whole lot for me because of the way you've heard me talk about USC, the way that I still feel about USC at the end of the day. I don't like the way that Washington's playing either. With the close call with Washington, the stinker that was the Arizona State win, 15-7. And it's funny because all that action came on the heels of beating Oregon at home by a field goal. And now, again, you've got if not the toughest, if not the toughest program in the nation, absolutely one of the toughest programs in the nation in Utah, coming over, should be feeling disrespected, even though it's at Washington that they are 9.5-point dogs. I think I like Washington to continue their winning ways, and it may not be in the prettiest fashion, because even if Washington wasn't playing some kind of sus football right now, Utah's just got such an ability to really muddy up football games, to really make you earn every yard and certainly every point that you look to put up. Over under of 49.5, which is super, super low. I'm going to go over that because I do trust Michael Penix. I don't trust the Washington defense all that much. I think there's certainly room for this game to go over that. And again, I'm going to say Washington wins, but Utah probably covers that 9.5 from my perspective leading into this game, even though we've talked about the troubles that they've had health-wise, roster-wise, all those things. Staying out west for one more game, and we've got USC, the Trojans, traveling to Oregon, traveling into a hornet's nest. I mean, good luck. You've got a 10:30 Eastern kick, and I probably got the time wrong on the first one because I'm, just now remembering how the time system works in the United States of America. 10:30 Eastern kick between the Trojans and the Ducks, the unranked 7-3 Trojans, who just should not be in the shape that they're in. They should have a defense. They've obviously fired Grinch, their DC. You've seen the emotions. You've seen the losses that they've taken. They did break their losing streak with the win over Cal. That could have also been a loss, and really just turned this into a potentially like a 8-4 team, which you certainly didn't hear many saying at the beginning of the year, despite the issues that I think we all knew existed in LA. Again, Trojans traveling to Oregon, to the Ducks, where the Ducks are 15-point home favorites. I love the Ducks to cover that 15, even if USC turns this into a shootout, a barn burner. I don't like their chances. They don't get stops. We've talked about Oregon's balance on this a whole bunch of times. Over under is 74.5, and how is USC going to stop Oregon from scoring 50 if they want to? And it's still Caleb Williams. It's still some of those explosive guys that they've got on the roster. I certainly think they're good for 21, 28 points if they're having their best day. Now, Oregon, I like them so much that I could see them keeping USC's offense down. And again, that's just a massive number of 74.5. But I think Oregon could really name their spot if they absolutely wanted to. So, I mean, as crazy as it is, I'm going over 74.5. I certainly think Oregon covers 15 points. I'm a little bit surprised, and maybe Vegas just can't do that much crazy in one matchup. But I mean, couldn't you see this being Oregon minus 20 at home, hosting USC in the shape they're in right now? And I guess there's always a chance that Oregon could overlook them, but they know the name, brand, the recognition that USC's gotten. They deserve that much, if not more, for the team that they have this year. The Ducks, they're going to cover that 15. And again, I could see this going over 74.5. I think that's the way that I'm going to lean on it. And, I mean, good luck to USC keeping Oregon under, 600 yards of offense? I mean, how are they going to get stops in this game when they've not been able to get stops against, your Cals, anybody recently, Washington, Utah that they lost to again, Notre Dame that they lost to in ugly, ugly fashion. They've given up yards and they've given up points everywhere. I mean, they haven't beaten anyone by more than a touchdown since Stanford back in the third game of their schedule when they won 56-10. They beat Arizona State on the 23rd of September by 14, but that's really the last time we've seen them do anything resembling like what they should have done. So what in the world would cause me to pick them to do something against Oregon that they've not done against inferior teams, less talented teams, slower teams? The balance again of Oregon, the speed and kind of the full package that they bring when USC is kind of trendy. They're doing things in the more modern way. They're not playing old school defense at all. Give me the Ducks. They're going to cover that. They're probably going to embarrass USC. I don't need to say again that USC is who we thought they were. They've proven that at this point. They've shown us all. And I think that's how Saturday night's going to play out. Bringing this show back closer to your boys and their location, back further south, back further east than that west tour that we just went on. I've got 4 more games that I want to touch on briefly before we really dive a little bit deeper into some of the premier games this weekend. Got 2 from the SEC, got 2 from the ACC, 2 pretty good matchups, 2 matchups that aren't so good, but I don't think we can just skip over, again, because of how great this week is, how great this weekend's slate is across the sport that we love. Leading this off with Florida and LSU. The series is tied 33 wins apiece, 3 ties. So somebody's going to get their 34th win in this series this weekend. And if it's Florida, it'll be on the road, Tiger Stadium, 7:30 Eastern time. The place is going to be a hornet's nest. The place, all collectively, all of Louisiana wants to bounce back from last week's tough loss at Alabama. I think this game is so simple. If I haven't mentioned it, Florida is also 14-point road dogs, which makes total sense to me if you look at the makeup of these teams right now, how the offenses are playing, because I think that's the key. I think Jaden Daniels, if he's back, I just don't see how Florida can overcome this. I think they could absolutely cover 14. Even if Jaden Daniels plays, I don't see how they can win this game, even if he doesn't play maybe. Just because of how limited they are at times offensively. We don't know what Florida we're going to get. They're looking for their first win in 3 weeks, dating back to at South Carolina, one of the absolute worst teams in the SEC this year, where they won 41-39. Ugly fashion, giving up that many points, needing 40 to beat South Carolina this year is not ideal. And again, things were different 3 weeks ago, but that's how it's played out. I don't see a path to victory for Florida unless Alabama just beats LSU twice, unless Jaden Daniels can't go and Garrett Nussmeier just stinks the place up. I don't see a true Florida beats a full or fullish strength LSU card on the table in the deck. I don't know where it is. It just doesn't feel real with the way that they've played recently, getting smacked by Georgia, losing that stinker of a game at home, that nooner to Arkansas. I don't know how you bounce back from that and beat LSU. Now, granted, this is absolutely, to those of us around these parts, the wildest sport in the world. So perhaps, I'm oversimplifying it a little bit. I don't see it, though. I'm going to say Florida covers 14. LSU absolutely wins the game. Over-under sitting at 64.5, which when I saw that initially, I was like, that's insane. Then I remembered how LSU can play defensively at times if they allow the motion, if they don't stop the runs. And granted, it's been the deep ball that they've not stopped that well. Florida's that's not a strength of theirs. Their strength is driving the ball down the field over several plays, holding on to time of possession, which if they can do, will benefit them greatly. I just don't think they'll be able to do all of those things in that environment, in that night slot that is so tough to play in. So give me the Tigers to win the game. Give me Florida to cover. And you know what? I've been leaning over probably way too much. Let's go under 64.5. It could go either way. Could certainly go over with LSU's defense, but give me the under 64.5 there. Just going to take a chance on that. And it's not like I'm putting any money on it anyway. Staying in the Southeast, but flipping over to the ACC real quick, you've got the Hurricanes of Miami traveling into Doak Campbell Stadium. They are also 14.5-point road dogs. Now, this one makes even more sense to me than Florida being 14-point underdogs at LSU. With the way that Florida State's been playing this year, yeah, it's been a little more sus lately. I think everyone goes through stretches, whether you're, a playoff contender like Florida State, whether you're someone that's more middle of the pack or even a team that's lost their fair share of those games. I think everyone goes through a stretch in the season, especially when it features some road games like Florida State at Pitt did last weekend. This line, again, 14.5, makes total sense to me. Probably not if you look at this sport historically, would you say that? But when you talk about the last several years, 10 plus for Miami, it makes sense that they're facing a line like that with how Florida State's been playing the game. I actually like Florida State to cover that 14.5. I think I've just got that much trust in their season as a whole. Maybe, again, not how they're playing exactly leading into Week 11, but there's too many things that I like about them, and I just don't trust Miami. If it comes down to game management, if it comes down to clock management, should we go for it? Should we punt it away? I don't trust them if it's a close game. I think they would almost have to run away with it or keep Florida State somehow at arm's length throughout, and I just don't think they're good enough to do that. So I think Florida State covers 14.5, over under 51.5, which is a pretty low number. I think I like both defenses here, but it's so low, and Florida State's just got so much explosion when they're on that I'm going to go over. Van Dyke, if he's healthy, he can obviously move the ball around. They've got some weapons that allow him to do it. They're just not – the consistency's just not there that you need to take steps early in a tenure like Cristobal is. They've still got a lot of holes that they've got to recruit. They've still got – he's got issues for me in his coaching style, in his track record. I don't like them to get the win here. I don't like them to cover here. And, again, I don't trust them very much one way either, under or over. But I'm going to take the over just because it's a pretty low number on the 51.5. But Florida State wins. Florida State covers 14.5. I think they're going to kind of cruise in this game because it's one that means a little bit more probably when you look at their state that they play in and all of those factors historically and all of that good stuff. Before, again, I get into the prime cut games of this Week 11 slate, got a couple more. These are more sadness bowls, more who cares bowls, but I want to touch on them for various reasons. Georgia Tech traveling to Clemson. I want to touch on this because Georgia Tech has been winning these odd games this year. The wins that they have are so wild. Who would have thought as of entering Week 11, Georgia Tech and Clemson are both 5-4. Again, if you said that before the season, if you said that early part of the season, show me some receipts. I don't believe you. Nonetheless, Yellow Jackets heading over to Clemson. They are 14.5-point road dogs. What about Clemson makes me think that they're going to handle any sort of business? I know that they just got the much-needed win over Notre Dame last week. Why would I trust them to cover 14.5 against UT Chattanooga right now? I don't have the proof. It's not there for me. I don't understand why you would bet that, other than Clemson's been Clemson and Georgia Tech's been Georgia Tech. And those things just seem to be breaking away from the norms of the last 5 to 10 years. Clemson is looking for its 9th straight win, I believe I saw, over Georgia Tech. I think they'll win the game. I wouldn't bet $1 that they cover 14.5 on anybody, just to be clear right now, not just Georgia Tech. And again, Georgia Tech kind of messed up the even odd numbered games that they win last week by beating Virginia. So what are they going to do in this even numbered game? I mean, would it be that shocking if they went to Clemson and won? Yeah, it'd be pretty shocking. But Clemson's playing such poor football right now over the season. I don't know how you could trust them. That's just what it comes down to for me. So Clemson wins the game. Georgia Tech covers. Over under 55.5. That thing's going so under. This game could be 12-7. It could be 3-2, 6-3. Don't trust these offenses. Do like a little bit of the defenses. I'll give these teams that, especially Clemson. They've still got dudes. They just aren't executing. They just aren't a very sound football team. And the last one, before we really get into the prime games, only mentioning this because of what Arkansas did last week with that win over Florida. And again, we've said it here, Arkansas has to win out to make a bowl. They're sitting at 3-6. They are hosting Auburn. They are hosting Auburn as 2.5-point favorites, which is pretty tempting here. Again, Arkansas needs this game if they want to get to a bowl. You've got to think that Pittman's job probably rides on making it to a bowl. If it doesn't, then they really need to reevaluate because of what they can be at Arkansas. And again, I'm rooting for Sam Pittman. I like the guy. I I've said this before, I love Glenn Ellerby, and I don't want to mess up the staff chemistry, but if we had an offensive line opening, coach opening at Tennessee, you can't find a better one than Sam Pittman, in my eyes. Obviously, running a program has been a lot tougher. We've seen that from so many coordinators, so many Saban assistants. We've seen guys fell left and right, you name it. But again, the Razorbacks hosting the Auburn Tigers, 2.5-point favorites. Unfortunately, I like Auburn to cover because I like Auburn to win the game outright. Again, ending Arkansas's bowl chase. They just took too many losses early on to really make it count this portion of the season. And again, I think they're going to struggle to beat Auburn because of the steps that they're taking in the right direction, the way that Auburn can really run the ball from quarterback to multiple routes at running back. I think it's going to be too much for Arkansas with the way that they've played this season. Over-under, telling number here because of how low it is yet again of these offenses. And look, we just saw Arkansas have a shootout with Florida, and all the things that Florida's playing for, they couldn't get that win. Over-under 48.5. Who cares? This is, again, it's all about bowl eligibility for Arkansas. If you held a gun to my head, I had to pick, I'd go over just because 48.5 is so low. That's only, get the teams in the upper 20s. They've got it covered, That's the way that would go. Give me the Tigers to win the game. They're obviously going to cover in doing that. And we're about to talk about now some of the absolute prime games of this weekend slate. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, and I want to tell you about our sponsor, North Forsyth Training and Fitness, NFTF, located 4015 Browns Bridge Road. If you're located in the Cumming area and ready to change your life physically or looking for a new gym, NFTF is the place for you. Owner, head coach, Jesse Foster, he's got all the credentials, all the experience that you would need to help you reach your goals. He's got morning classes running 5:30, 7:30, and 9. Afternoon classes 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30. So there's a class in that time frame that would fit your schedule. NFTF is a community-driven gym. Not only you achieving your goals, you're going to do it with a group of people that you'll call your friends in your community. So if you need to know more about NFTF, contact Jesse at 706-633-6609. Make sure to let him know the boys at Pandemonium Reigns sent you. Approaching the territory of landing the plane, but not before we finally get into this week's premier games. Kicking that off with Michigan, 4.5-point road favorites at Penn State. A few unfortunate things about this game. First of all, is a noon Eastern kickoff. This game deserves a wideout. Look, I know if you're a Michigan fan, maybe if you're a player, you appreciate this time slot. This game deserves, one loss between them with Penn State sitting at 8-1. It deserves that night game wideout. I understand, it's cold. Weather could be a factor at night, yada, yada, you name it. This game deserves that wideout environment, though. Really unfortunate that we don't get it for this game. But again, Michigan, the Wolverines traveling to Penn State. They are 4.5-point road favorites. You've got an over-under of 44.5. Think about what that says about these defenses. That is definitely the strengths of these teams. Other strengths, I would say, is Michigan's kind of versatility. They can obviously hit you through the air. If McCarthy is on, you've got receiving weapons and just a more kind of functional, flowing air attack, I think, than the Nittany Lions have for their squad. You've also got Michigan, who's been playing over the last month plus. I don't know. It's this saga of Connor Stallions, the cheating scandal allegations of the links that he or they or whoever in blue went to gain information about opponents is just getting so ridiculous. I mean, make this thing a movie, and I don't mean a documentary just telling us the facts, although we need one too. We need a 30 for 30 on this, and it's cooking. I mean, it's too good not to. But give me an absolute movie. I mean, give me Tom Cruise as Connor Stallions. Give me, you name it. Just give me stars playing this thing out, real life, somebody running around as Connor Stallions with a mustache and, you know, a disguise on the Central Michigan sidelines, watching them play against Michigan State, gaining what would you possibly need to gain against Michigan State if that aspect of this whole thing is true? I mean, Michigan wins that game 49-0. I think they could have shut out Michigan State, especially in a year like this, you know, with zero information, with little to no game plan in place, you know, scouting. What do you actually need? What can you gain about a team so bad as Michigan State right now? It's wild. These are, again, make it a soap opera series, make it an absolute Hollywood film. I'll watch it. I'm obviously here for the documentaries that are going to come out of this time. Michigan's been, you know, sending it back the other way, talking about information that was shared about them through various matchups, and I think that just highlights that this crap happens. The sport is dirty. Rubbing is racing, if you will. And again, I think it just crosses the line if you go to the links that Michigan is accused of, that Connor Stallions more so is accused of, and frankly, that it looks to me that he's done those things. It's all going to come down to what can you prove. Harbaugh, AD, members at Michigan, what did they know? What information did they accept? Did they instruct him to do these things? I mean, I wish honestly, and I like Michigan, so this is kind of painful to say, I wish Stallions would just get mad and let it loose, man. I want the intel. I want the dirt. Again, all of that said, what impacts do those things have in a big game like this? Because for Michigan, it's the first big game, first really good, really, really solid 85-man opponent that they've played. You can't look through Michigan's schedule right now. And again, there was a canceled game, a buyout game that was supposed to be there, I believe, with Washington this year. And what a matchup that would have been. Wouldn't mind seeing that one in the playoffs or in bowl season. But you can't look through Michigan's schedule and find a big game that they've played, that they've won. I think the best thing going for them is they've kind of manhandled everyone. You know, a little odd, a little off at times of their 28-point home win against Purdue last week. Purdue's certainly not a great team. Not Jeff, you know, they're not Brahms, Purdue anymore. It's Ryan Walters' show there now, and they're just not the program that they've been at times that can really scheme up and challenge an opponent like a Michigan, like they've done at times before. Penn State, a little more battle tested, most namely through their loss against Ohio State. At Ohio State, the game that they lost by 8 points. You know, they got tested the week after that. Could have been a little bit hungover from that loss, but they squeaked past Indiana a week later at home by 9 points. Needed a late touchdown to even get that dub to 9 points and make it look a little more respectable. If you look back though, late in September, they did have a nice, and I say nice because of Iowa's defense, a nice 31-0 win over Iowa, also at home, just like this game's going to be. So Penn State probably more ready for a game like this versus a Michigan who has kind of coasted into the middle of November, which, you know, again, not a fan of that. My team's not played the toughest schedule ever this year, and it still found a couple losses on that schedule, but just never a fan of a schedule like this that allows you to just breeze into November. But again, props to Michigan for handling teams the way that they've had. Between the teams, I think it comes down to me for this game is Michigan's offense. Again, the versatility that I talked about. McCarthy, he can get the ball down the field. He can hurt you with his legs. You've still got Blake Corum. You've still got Donovan Edwards. You've still got guys on that defense. Again, maybe assisted by a little bit too much information, but they're just flat out handling business, whether they know what's coming, whether they don't. There's just too much for me that I like about Michigan when Penn State has kind of struggled in these big moments. They've kind of struggled to get things going offensively at other times. I think that's going to be too much for Penn State to overcome despite this game being at home. Now, if Michigan wins this game, you've got to really like their chances against Ohio State as well. If you don't already, I kind of do, just based on the teams, how they're playing. Not so much, again, the drama surrounding Michigan. But I think what I like, and I think this will be a close game because of the home field that Penn State will still have behind them. I think they'll cover the 4.5, but I do think Michigan wins a close game here. I certainly think, again, we've just got to get into the 20s, guys. I think we go over 44.5 because of how low that is. These defenses are capable of keeping that number below. I mean, this is, again, talked about it a minute ago with a much less impactful game with playoff implications and bowl implications. But these defenses are capable of keeping that number low. But I think with everything that comes into this game, I'm going to take the over. It's just too low for me in a big game like this. I think Michigan's going to be playing from a mindset of, we've got so much drama, so many attacks coming at us, and just watch us. They're going to flourish, I think, with the drama that they've been facing. So give me Michigan to win the game, Penn State to cover, give me over 44.5. Traveling south and to the west just a little bit from Pennsylvania over to Lexington, where the Wildcats, the Mildcats, as some might call them, will be hosting the Crimson Tide of Alabama. Alabama, man, they've been impressive the way that they've done things without any form of the attack that they've had through the air. They don't have the ground game that they said and that the experts said and that the insiders thought they would have without running their quarterback. They don't have the traditional ground game this year through Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams, but they're still such a potent team. They are still such a stout defense that can really bow their neck when the time comes, and I think that's going to be a big issue for Kentucky. Just look back a couple weeks into October with Kentucky when they traveled to Athens, and they managed 13 points against Georgia this year. Not Georgia 2021, not Georgia 22. The record-setting defenses. It's the 2023 one that can't hit you from quite so many levels. They don't cause quite the number of issues that they used to cause, but they're still stout. And I think the defense of Alabama is going to be looking to give basically that treatment to this Kentucky team. I don't like – we've seen Leary play some of his better ball of the season. You can't convince me, though, when this guy couldn't beat a Tennessee at home, when they couldn't manage again they couldn't manage more than 13 against Georgia, the way that Missouri came in and kind of slapped them around after they built a lead. You can't tell me that team is going to be that team is going to give Nick Saban a second regular season loss. There's just too many variables that I'm not going to buy. I'm not going to believe. I think Alabama could win this game a number of different ways, and I think Kentucky would need everything to fall perfectly in order just as they planned it. And I just don't think Nick Saban's ever going to let you do that. I think you're going to need to adapt, or you're going to need such skill level, such talent to do that to them that Kentucky's just never had in my lifetime. They certainly don't have it now. They do have Ray Davis. Alabama's going to be really stiff against that run. I mean, Ray Davis, within 100 yards of 1,000 on the year, he's been so impressive. He can obviously do it with a handoff. He can do it catching it out of the backfield. But again, there's no reason for me to like Kentucky in this game. And it more than anything else, and I said it a moment ago, I just don't believe that Kentucky, that Mark Stoops, that the Wildcats that I've known 30-plus years of my life are going to be the team at this point to give Alabama a second regular season loss. I don't think I've set this one up yet properly. Alabama 11-point road favorites in Lexington. That's a pretty big number. That tells you that it would be 14 if this game was played in Tuscaloosa because of the home field advantage and the 3 points for the home team that you usually see in a betting spread. That's a rather massive number for a road team. But I think it's indicative of how Kentucky's played. Look at what Alabama did. 28 points allowed when Jaden Daniels was in the game. Questionable call for sure that knocked him out of the game. But, it's not like they lost Dallas Turner for the first half to a targeting call. He's still in there. He's still going to be causing problems for Leary and that offense. So that's, again, a pretty large number at 11. I think Alabama covers it. I think they could absolutely win this game by 2+ touchdowns. I think they could win it by over-under sitting at 47.5. man, there's some lower numbers this week. And look, I've been riding the overs, and I think it's easy to do that in my mind when the numbers are super low. It's also very easy, and this is not an absolutely premier top of the line opponent for Alabama. Alabama's obviously got major aspirations for the season left in their tank. Kentucky's, on the outside looking in of anything, but they're vying for bowl bids at this point at 6-3. They're not vying for Atlanta. They're not vying for a playoff like Alabama hopes to still do. So it really comes down to those things. And offenses can get tight when those type of things are on the line. And I'm just kind of speaking holistically to week 11, not to this game. But 47.5, and I think I'm going to go under. I think Alabama, I don't think they're just going to walk in there and name their score like, some of their vicious passing attacks probably would have done at times over, the last few years. But they're still a far superior team to me with what Kentucky has shown in their losses. And I think they're going to go in there and kind of name their score. I think they could absolutely win by 17 plus, like I said a minute ago. Give me Alabama covering 11. I'm going to take the under, like I said, just because Alabama is not quite as potent as they've been. But I think that's how it's going to shake out in Lexington. Last, certainly not least, on the slate for Week 11, Lane Kiffin and his Ole Miss squad traveling to Athens, Georgia to face the Dogs, 7 p.m. Sanford Stadium. You've got Georgia, who are 10.5 home favorites, 10.5 point favorites at home. You've got an over-under of 58.5. Wild to see a number like that when the game features Georgia and the defense that they've been known for. Basically, this all boils down to me. What you got, Ole Miss? What you got, Lane? Can y'all devise a game plan or have enough curveballs and change-ups in your game plan to actually challenge this Georgia team in ways that Missouri wasn't able to do within 9 points? Again, counting a couple turnovers in that were huge in Georgia's efforts in holding Missouri off. Look at Ole Miss and kind of, I'm going to call it, I don't feel bad about calling it a stinker that they laid in Tuscaloosa, being held to 10 points when we're all expecting, no, I'm actually not expecting it, but it seems like people are expecting Lane to be the next former Saban assistant to knock him off. Look, if he hasn't done it now, why in the heck is he going to do it in the future unless, again, we get to the absolute end of Saban's career or something like that, which he's proving this is clearly not. He is certainly not out of juice as a head coach. So what does Lane have? What can he even stack his deck full of? How can he even, play his cards to me to cover 10.5 points in Athens at 7 p.m.? You've got Georgia fans online calling for an environment, the most recent one they point to is hosting number 1 Tennessee in 2022. That's the closest one that they kind of point to. You kind of talk about there's a little bit of disappointment in the environment for when they hosted Missouri last week and that it wasn't good enough for their standards, which is, I think, fair. I did watch more than half of that game, and I would agree with that. But again, you talk about a not game with a hothead still guy that likes to talk, a one-loss team, a top 10 opponent in Ole Miss, number 9, as they currently sit right now, and that environment should be rocking. Now, Tennessee fans, we need Ole Miss, we need Lane Kiffin to do us solid because he's never done many of those for Tennessee. But if you're Tennessee, you need him to win this game to give you a chance at playing for the East if you beat Missouri and have Georgia coming in. When you're going to play them next week regardless, you need that game. If you want it to count for the East, then you need Ole Miss to win this game. And I'm sorry, I don't think Brock Bowers is a factor. I don't think there are many factors that Ole Miss can pull in this game. I like Georgia to cover that 10.5 point spread. 58.5 all depends on what Georgia offense we get. Do we get the one that kind of starts slow out of the gate that kind of matches how the opponent's playing, or even Georgia's done this year. They've got out to touchdown or so deficits in games, and they've flown right back. The greatest example, kind of the sleepiest game, if you will, that they've played all year being at Auburn, And look, that's an old rivalry with deep roots. You've also got the fact that Ole Miss is the only active SEC team that Kirby's not beat in his tenure at Georgia. They got killed by Ole Miss in 2016, his first year in Athens, obviously. They got killed by them then. I just think it couldn't be more different this time around. I don't expect them to embarrass Ole Miss. They certainly could. I also don't think that, unless it's a 28-point beatdown or maybe even 21, you could stretch it down there, that it's an embarrassment. But they're certainly better than 10.5 points over Ole Miss right now. I like Georgia to win this game by 14-17 all day. I'm going to go under 58.5 just because, again, talk about Ole Miss scoring 10 points in Tuscaloosa and all the talk about Lane being the next Saban assistant to beat them. Didn't happen. The things that I like for Ole Miss would have to absolutely just be insane, and that's Dart's legs. He is their third leading rusher with a very respectable 334 and 7 touchdowns this year. The problem for me is that I don't think he is going to process things quickly enough. I don't think the receivers are going to be open enough for him to do anywhere near his average or anywhere near his best through the air. And again, this is not the same Georgia defense of 2021 and 2022. I just don't see it being enough. I'd be shocked if it was. Give me Georgia to cover. Give me the under yet again, although I'll be rooting for Ole Miss. I'm not going to tell my wife that. I'm not going to tell my Georgia buddies that. I will certainly be rooting for Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin as hard as that can be. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Talk about, again, just a jam-packed slate. When we're this far, when we're 11 weeks into the season, this is what we deserve. We're getting a great slate. Didn't even mention some probably really good games out there. Those games that Dan always is like, hey, check out ESPN2. Check out what's going on with Kansas and you name it. We've got more games like that I didn't even talk about. It's just a jam-packed slate. Can't wait to take the action in. It's going to be a beautiful day, at least in these parts. And hoping to see, again, nothing but fantastic football played across the country from noon to midnight, because talk about that Oregon and USC game kicking off so late. It'll definitely be Sunday Eastern by the time that bad boy ends. All those things said, thank you so much for tuning in to the Pandemonium Reigns podcast. We love doing this for you. We appreciate you so much for keeping us going, for checking it out. Again, share your thoughts with us. Share this podcast. Like, follow, subscribe if you haven't already. God bless. GBO. Go Rebel Black Bear Land Sharks.